Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who helped shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic crosstown concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Now, we don't really have sponsors for this show, but if we pretended that we did, today's episode, which is the first of two interviews with Paul Behnke, would be sponsored by MCA Saturday School. MCA, Memphis College of Art, which was around for a really long time, had this Saturday school program where kids would come in and they would take classes on the MCA grounds. And it was totally magical. I had that experience with a sculpture class taught by Mark Gooch when I was a kid, and I remember it being totally wild and totally strange and really exciting. So thank you, MCA. Now, again, today's interview is the first of two interviews that I did with Paul Behnke. It was recorded on November 30th, 2024. Enjoy the interview. So here we are. It is Saturday, November 30th, and I'm here with Paul Behnke, and it's at the Memphis Listening Lab, and we're doing this project, which I think I might call Memphis Material, or an oral history project, just to kind of like throw back to the space. I haven't solidified that yet. Okay, Paul, talk to me. Tell me, Krista Tippett has that great line about what's your earliest memory of faith. What about for you? What's your earliest memory with art and the arts?
I think with art, with any kind of art, the first thing I was probably aware of that this is art, this is something that someone, an undertaking that someone did with a purpose, was looking at this big picture book, Bible, that my grandmother had, and she was very religious, and she always had all of these kind of iconic things out in her house. Like she had these little altar things set up, and the paintings of Jesus, the little prints that you would get with the Sacré-Cœur, and showing the stigmata, and which is weird because she was a Church of Christ, which is a pretty no-nonsense fundamental religion, but she loved all of that iconography, and but it pained her to see Jesus bleeding or hurt, so she would go back in with paints and paint over, mix a flesh color, a white flesh color, and paint over the wounds and the blood droplets from the crown of thorns.
Now, was she a painter?
No,
she just went and got the paints,
right? Yeah.
Just to do this one thing.
Just to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. She probably used the paints from like some paint by number set that one of her kids had, or my mom or my aunt or somebody had. But so that was one thing. But then also the Bible too, that she had all of these old master reproductions in it of the biblical scenes, Samson and Delilah, and all of these kinds of great kind of overwrought, passionate stories, and they just captured my imagination. And
now, what was it about them? I mean, you were talking about how they sort of illustrated these stories. I mean, what about them visually?
Well, part of it, was the visual character. A lot of it was like this Caravaggio-esque, Carashiro, this lights and darks, and just this dramatic they were all dramatic. They were all very, you could get, even if you didn't know the stories, and I didn't know all of them when I was a kid, but they seemed like something was going on, something important, something emotional, and that, I think, kind of stuck with me. And
now, was this something that you talked about with your grandmother and other people in your family? Was it something that was a point of conversation where there was a kind of encouragement for you to look at these things?
Well, I mean, not my family was my grandmother, my aunt, and my grandfather lived very close to where my family lived. My mom and stepfather and brother and sister where we lived, and so we were kind of raised a lot by my grandparents and my aunt. We spent a lot of time at their house. We would go to church with them on Sunday mornings. My mom and stepfather I think they were religious then, but they weren't. They didn't go to church that much. It wasn't like prevalent in our house really, but at my grandmother's it was really prevalent. Like every night, she would just go in her room. My grandfather would be in the living room watching TV or whatever, and she would be in her room reading out loud from the Bible, just by herself if nobody else was in there. And so a lot of times I would go and listen to her read passages out of the Bible. It was also a weird kind of thing where she kind of combined that kind of religious spirituality with a supernatural kind of element. Like she believed in ghosts and thought she saw ghosts and thought she heard voices and was always doing automatic writing or automatic drawing. Just with a ballpoint pen on her crossword book, she would like just do these things, and sometimes they would look like faces eventually, or whatever. Usually it was just ink over ink over ink over ink,
Now, how was she? I mean, was this one of those things where grandma just did this, or was it one of those things where you guys also kind of talked about it? Like, was she? I mean, I grew up not necessarily in the Pentecostal church, but it was sort of Pentecostal adjacent, and so there was this idea of channeling or being moved by the Spirit. Was it one of those things where she talked about it?
Well, I mean, I don't ever remember a lot of discussion about it. I remember going to church. I remember going to Sunday school. So I learned the Bible studies. I was also going to a religious grade school. So I got the stories and talked about it in all of those contexts, but I never really remember talking to my grandmother about it, about anything specifically, until I got older and I was kind of rebelling against all of that stuff. Okay. And we would have arguments about religion and did it make sense and why it did or didn't and that kind of thing. But I don't remember I don't remember any kind of conversations about it really when I was a kid.
Well, I mean, one of the things for me too is that, I mean, as I'm thinking about that, I remember going and being there at church, and when the people would speak in tongues, or when they would raise their hands, or when they would sort of fall out. For me, it was scary. I mean, there was this sort of strange. I mean, I had not been raised in it. I mean, my parents started going to church when I was maybe in high school, and so for sure I was really kind of wigged out by it. Was it something that felt comfortable to you about it?
The religious, the biblical stuff felt comfortable to me, but the supernatural stuff was definitely scary. Like my grandmother was always doing the Ouija board and talking to or getting messages from spirits, she thought, and things like that. So that was very scary. I remember as a kid even being afraid. One night at her house, we were watching In Search Of, and they were talking about some scary-ish kind of story. And I remember being scared about that, and then leaving the room to go to another room so I didn't have to listen to it or watch it, and then being scared because I was in the house and I thought ghosts and spirits were in that house anyway.
Right.
And then I was by myself, So, and also I do remember as a kid, saying saying my prayers at night, every night. And if I didn't, I would wake up panicked, because I thought, oh, if I die, I'm going to go to hell, or the devil's going to reach out from under the bed and grab me, so I would try to sleep in the middle of the bed. So there was, less chance of, I had more surface that he would have to reach over to get me, And
now let's back up just a second. So where was this? Was this here in Memphis?
In Memphis, yeah.
I see. Okay. In what neighborhood?
We lived in over there in the Kimball, Getwell Park, that kind of area. My grandmother lived on Rhodes, Rhodes Avenue, near, I guess it's Getwell and Rhodes turns into Barron if it goes the other way. And then we lived on a little street called Christie Cove, which was off of Kimball and Getwell over there. So not even probably maybe a mile away.
So you were talking about the art at your grandmother's house. Mm-hmm. What about at your folks' place?
Well, at my house, my mom and my stepfather were always very creative. My mom could draw and paint, and my stepfather could too. He also did a lot more of like woodworking, and he built furniture sometimes and things like that. They were both very creative, and but my mom, I think she always wanted to be like an art teacher or an artist. But she got married very young. When I was born, she was 20 and my dad was 18, and so I think she was in college and dropped out when she got pregnant. My father definitely did, and but. So growing up, I think she kind of loved the fact that I was artistic and interested in that kind of stuff. So for her, as far as like the interaction with her for art, I was so interested in comic books and all of those science fiction and comics as a kid. And so if I couldn't draw something, I would always go to her and say, how do you draw this or how do you draw that? And she would draw it for me, and then I would take that back and copy it in my own drawings,
Now, when would you do this? Would it be a thing that was kind of a regular thing where you guys would, get together on the weekends?
It wasn't necessarily that structured, but she worked at this place called Orgel Brothers, and so she was like a key punch operator, an old key punch operator there. And so they would those old, I guess, computer paper that was like the green and white striped with the perforated. She would bring home stacks of that for me, and I would just draw on those and fold it over and either make my own comics or just draw superhero kind of things. And it was never like really like a thing where she sat down and showed me how to draw or anything. But if I had a question like, oh, how do you draw a fist holding a gun or this or that or whatever, she would do it, and then I would take it back and copy that. She was my stepfather and her were very good about encouraging me as far as classes. Like I took Saturday classes at the old art academy. When I was a kid, I remember, they would have us out there drawing the Doughboy statue over and over and over again and things like that. But back then, I really didn't like the classes that much. I wanted to be home just drawing whatever I wanted to draw. And also I resented the imposition on my time. Like I'm like, this is Saturday morning. It's my time off of school.
It's primo cartoon.
I should be watching cartoons. I should be watching wrestling. I should be, just drawing whatever I want to draw.
Now, when you were saying that you would make these drawings or you would make these comics, like what kind of things were you drawing?
Well, I would kind of make up a lot of my own kind of heroes and superheroes and superheroines and kind of based on a model of like the Legion of Superheroes. That kind of stuff. But then I would also draw, all the typical Batman. I remember this one drawing I made that is still in my head. I don't know why, but I loved Elton John when I was a kid. One Halloween, I even went as Elton John. And I drew a picture of Elton John singing at the piano in a concert, singing Someone Saved My Life Tonight. And someone's trying to assassinate him, and my Batman is throwing his batarang in front of the bullet to save him. And for some reason that sticks in my head still to this day out of all the drawings I did back then. I don't know why I still remember that one, but...
That sounds like such a good, I mean, for me, everything is an assignment, you know? And so, like, for me, the idea of having people make that drawing is such a good impulse, you know? I mean, it has this great story, and it has so many possibilities. And so thinking about that, like, what kind of things, like, you were talking about the Legion of Superheroes, what were some other things that you were kind of looking at or in terms of visual information?
Well, because I had those classes, so I did know a little bit about, you know, like what a still life was and what, you know, those kind of projects were, self-portrait, still life, things like that. So I would do those occasionally. I would do some of those. I would do some like drawings of my brother or my sister a little bit. But mostly it was all just out of my head type stuff.
Now, what about your siblings? You mentioned them a couple of times. Are they interested in the arts, or were they also creatives when you were growing up?
My sister is 2 years younger. She's a little bit more like our biological dad, who is very good and very smart in maths and sciences and things like that. She does have a creative aspect to her. I think she writes a little bit and stuff like that, but mostly she's just wicked smart. And she's a blackjack dealer right now at the casinos, and she does well there. My younger brother, he is 7 years younger than me, and he is very creative. He can draw and paint and stuff as well, but he's a musician. His name is Jason Freeman, and he plays a lot around town here, and with the Bluff City Backsliders and a couple of other ukulele band he was with for a while, and you know, so he's more focused on music and singing and songwriting and stuff.
So that was something that your parents encouraged?
Yeah,
they signed you up for these classes,
right? And we never. I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I don't think any of us siblings ever heard, "Oh, don't do that. You're never going to make any money doing that. You need to have something to fall back on." Nobody ever. Sometimes I wish they had, because I'd be a little better maybe at like structure and managing my money and not being so impractical and crazy. But you got to take the good with the bad. And it was very good. It was very good because, I hear so many stories of people whose parents really fought them and discouraged them from doing any kind of creative endeavor, really.
Yeah. Now, thinking about those classes at the Art Academy, I mean, you and I are of the same generation, and so I remember taking those classes too. And for me, the thing that I remember about them was how, for me, they felt totally like they just let some kids run loose in some grown-up space. Like, because when I took classes, I think my parents had me in sculpture or something, and Mark Gooch taught it. And anyway, and I just remember being in there and I remember the other kids were just weird as hell. And then I remember that I felt like this place was not really designed for someone my age, right. Because it was dangerous stuff like everywhere. What was the experience like for you? Like, how do you remember those Art Academy workshops?
It was fun. Like I said, I kind of did resent some of the time having to be there, and I didn't feel like I really appreciated it that much. But I do know what you're talking about that kind of feeling of being in this place and it was cool too, because the building was so cool. And then also, and so different. And then also, it's this place where this is all is done here, making art. Everybody that comes here, everybody that goes here is involved in making some kind of art. And so that was, I mean, I realized that at that time. That was something that I thought was really cool. This was a whole building dedicated to what I wanted to do, what I like to do.
Now, how old were you then?
I was probably third, fourth grade, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
Now, was art something that was also going on in the school classroom?
Not really. Not really. I went to for grade school, I started out at South Park Elementary over there in that Getwell area. Then I went, for second grade, I went to a Baptist school. And it was called Harmony Baptist, kind of in that same area too. And then after that, in the third grade, I started going to Christ the King Lutheran School. My dad's half of the family was Lutheran, and my mom's was Church of Christ. But my parents wanted to send me to a private school, and so we had an uncle or something. I think it was our uncle that was kind of connected with that school, and so he got me and my sister to go to school over there. But I remember us having a music class, and I remember us having and I went there from the third to the eighth grade. And I remember us having a music, and we did writing, creative writing, but I don't remember any visual arts. And I remember learning German there and stuff like that when I was a kid. But
that explains so much, Paul. I mean, in terms of thinking about the kinds of art that you gravitate towards, I mean, I remember I had this teacher, Alex Weisenfeld, in grad school, and she was like, your paintings are so German. And so, like, if there was a kindred spirit on the our paintings are so German softball team, it would be me and you.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, when we're thinking about that time, was art also something that you and your family would do? Like, would you guys go to museums, or would you do anything like that?
Not really. I remember when I was older, one time there was some sort of art walk, kind of downtown-ish in Memphis, and I remember my family going to that, and I don't know really why we did. I don't know if my parents knew somebody that had a studio open for it, or what was the reason, or my mom just said, "Oh, let's just something to do on a Saturday, and let's just go." But I don't. Other than that, I really don't remember, like say going to an art museum. Or
now, what about high school?
In high school, I went to Overton, which was
I mean, that's the art school.
That's I when I was in junior high at White Station, I had an art teacher named Diane Stevens, and she, in our art class, she took me and this young kid named Audrey Key aside, and she said, "You two should be making a portfolio to try to get into Overton, to their art program." And so she went and got the portfolio requirements for us and gave it to us. And then she let us dedicate that art time for our art class into only doing projects for that portfolio. And all the other kids worked on other things. So because of her, I got that portfolio together and applied to Overton. So then I went there 10th to the 12th grade.
Okay. Now, when the teacher came to you, the teacher at White Station came to you with this possibility, was it something that was kind of alien to you, or was it something that just felt like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense?
Well, I didn't really know, have any idea really. I was never one of those kids who knew what they wanted to do or what they wanted to be at a young age or anything, and but I knew I loved art, and I loved so I kind of vaguely saw that as something that I would do into adulthood. That's what I would be. And but so when she mentioned that, I just thought, yeah, that's the logical step. Okay. And it wasn't. And it's a logical step that's just being presented to me. Mm-hmm. It's not one that I have gone out and tried to seek out really or knew about before or anything like that. So I thought, yeah, better do it.
Now, what was that like? I mean, I would imagine that it would be like going from a place where art was a part of the world to going to a place where the art was pretty important. Was that the way it was?
Yeah, I mean, Overton was great. It didn't have much of a football team at the the fine arts school, but it was great. I had so much of a better art education there than I would have gotten anywhere else. We had a teacher there named Linda Gibson, who was a photographer, and she would take the class to I remember there was a performance artist at the U of M one time, and she took our class to see this performance artist. His name was John Schermonte.
Yeah.
And we saw him, and he really inspired me. He really caught my imagination because he was talking about Dalton Trumbo and Johnny Got His Gun and burning your draft card and all of this kind of stuff. So so that opened my eyes too about this kind of sense of society and rebellion. And
so total tangent. So he did a performance at MCCA. Mm-hmm. Did you see it?
I don't think so.
So here's the thing. Here's what I want to do. I want to have if I did want to edit these down, that performance that he did at MCCA, I was there, and several other people that I've interviewed were also there, and it's kind of an urban legend thing. He was doing this performance, and then at some point decided to punch this pane of glass, and then cut himself really bad and had to go to the hospital. Had to stop the performance, go to the hospital. And so anyway, it's one of these things where we could totally layer these different performances. But I love how this guy, John
Schermonte, I think was his name.
Yeah, I love how he has probably been mentioned more than just about anybody else in this.
Oh, that's really funny.
In terms of thinking about that him sort of being a person that people remember his name, and they sort of remember the thing that he did. And I'll have to track him down and see if I can find him. But now that's a huge thing to go there. Now, what about the other kids or the other students in the class with you?
Well, I'm still friends with a couple of them to this day, and they were all. I just remember feeling like everybody was much more talented than I was. That all of their drawing skills were better, and so. But it didn't make me necessarily feel bad. It made me want to have a sense of competition. I think that I wanted to get to as good as they were, and it was nice. It was good to have a peer group who we were all interested in this thing. That was the first time I had known really a lot of other kids who felt about art the way that I did and were really into it. And then we not only did our teacher take us to see that guy, but we learned about surrealism and Dada and stuff like that I don't think we would have necessarily been talking. I mean, maybe in a regular art program, you might hear about Van Gogh or somebody like that, Picasso, but Cubism or something. But this teacher, she was really great at exposing us to more stuff.
Now, I mean, as a teacher, one of the questions that I have is, how did she do that? I think there's a part of me that says, you teach everything chronologically because that's how it happened, and then you teach things in reference to how it happened in history. Mm-hmm. But even today in 2024, when I try to explain Dada to a class full of 18-year-olds, it can be funny and strange, but I'm not totally sure if they got it. How did you process it?
Well, I think I remember the first thing I remember about Dada was that it's this reaction to these horrors of World War I. Mm-hmm. that it did seem strange and odd and sometimes funny, sometimes disturbing, but that's the thing that stuck with me, that it was a reaction, that it was art as a reaction to an event, this big, huge event that everybody went through. And that's how they expressed that experience. And so that was kind of formative for me too. And I think I owe that to her too. But we didn't really have like art history per se, but she would come up with these projects or come up, I think, with things she wanted to talk about, or she was maybe reading about, or she was, into, and then she would find a way and present it to us, and then we would do a project based on Dada or surrealism or, something like that.
Now, when you think about looking at that stuff when you were that age, I mean, one of the reasons I'm saying that is like I enjoyed looking at the Dada work because it felt like I could do it. Like whereas when you look at like Salvador Dali or when you look at Rembrandt or whoever we're looking at, you're just like, I would never be able to do that. But then with Dada, you're like, that's really weird, and it looks like they had fun.
You're kind of just describing my experience in high school, and the reason why my last couple of years in high school I concentrated on photography. Because I, at the time, when you're a kid, the be-all and end-all of art is representation, So, yeah, I was looking at people like Dali and all of these incredible painters. And yeah, I exactly. I was just like, I don't have the chops. I can't. I mean, some of my classmates could already paint pretty realistically. There's a classmate that I went to school with named Lonnie Robinson that's here in town here still, and his portrait of Martin Luther King Jr. is in the Civil Rights Museum and all of this stuff, but he's always been amazing like that. And but I didn't have those skills to do that, and so I kind of not lost interest, but I guess I was discouraged by it. And then because I wanted to do something that was realistic. And so then when I kind of discovered photography, like I said, this woman, our teacher, was her discipline was photography. I learned how to develop film in the darkroom and all of that. And I just got into that. And it was kind of like I can't do this, so I'm going to focus on that, And it wasn't until years later, after I'd been through a couple semesters at U of M after high school, and then living on my own in North Carolina, that I started to paint again. And that's when I discovered the German Expressionists. And I thought really naively, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could paint like that, because it wasn't realistic. It was more expressionistic, and it was, more personal and emotional and crude and heavy-handed, it seems like. And so I thought, oh, maybe this is a way in back to painting, So
now, just to backtrack a little bit in terms of thinking about the high school time, I mean, part of me thinks that Overton would just be a whole school full of kids kind of like us, whereas, like for me, my experience, there were a couple of safe zones. One was the place where we would play chess, during lunchtime, and the other place was in the art room. And so there were these like two sort of safe spaces, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And so was it that way for you in terms of thinking about high school and the dynamic there?
No, I don't feel, at Overton, there was so many. Everyone was either an artist, they were into drama, they were in show choir or dancers, or, even the kids that were in like Votech, or there were jocks. I remember having friends in all of those groups, and everybody kind of just mingled, There wasn't, I never felt like that kind of, I didn't have, now in White Station it was different. It was a little rougher, scarier place sometimes, especially for people who are creative. But at Overton, I never felt that at all. I had a group of friends, and most of them were artists, or in some or in drama or something, And
then a minute ago, you said you started at U of M.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that like? I mean, in terms of thinking about the high school decision to eventually go to college, and how did that work for you?
Well, that was right after high school. Mm-hmm. I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And my mom was like, "Oh, you should join the Army." And we're not at war right now. It'll only be 2. And I know what I don't want to do. I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. And joining the Army is one of those things.
It's the top of the list.
Right, right. And so that was out of the question. So I enrolled at U of M, and I remember I wanted to major in art, fine art. And my advisor was like, no. You don't want to major in fine art. You want to major in graphic design. You're never going to make any money in fine art. And I just had zero interest in graphic design. I did not want to do it at all. And so I just went undeclared. And I went there for 2 semesters. I remember taking a color theory from like Bonnie Beaver. But then... And I wasn't very much interested in school. I had my first serious girlfriend there. She was already going to U of M, and I was more concerned with her than I was any of my classes or anything, and especially since I wasn't really studying art, anything I was really interested in. So I ended up taking this class, Acting for Non-Majors. And part of it, they made us audition for one of the school plays. And this director he was like a visiting artist director from Chicago, and he was putting on this play at U of M. And so our class auditioned, and I got cast in that play. And it was the first time I'd ever really done a play or thought about being in a play or acting or anything like that. And it was so fun. It was so much fun. You get a ready-made peer group, everybody is kind of slackers. They're always smoking cigarettes and hanging out, and you're at rehearsal together every night. So these bonds are really formed really quickly. So I just loved that whole experience. It was a play. It was this, I think it was an Ionesco play called The Serpent. And it was kind of like a Dadaist kind of weird thing. Like one of those counterculture kind of plays. And so it was religious based, so something I was kind of drawn to too. And but so then after that was such a great experience, and I'd pretty much just stopped going to all my other classes and was only doing the play and my Acting for Non-Majors class. So I flunked out of school. But I started going to auditions for local community theater here at Circuit Playhouse on the Square, Theater Memphis, and I did plays in those places. I did plays. I got a job acting in one of the scenes they all did for tourists on Mud Island, and then when right after that, I met this girl doing a play at Circuit, and she was going to school at UNC in Chapel Hill, and she wanted to be a stage manager. And so she was going through that theater program there to be a stage manager. So I wasn't doing anything except doing plays and stuff here. Anything I could do here, I thought I can do there. So when she graduated, I moved to Chapel Hill, and I got an agent in Raleigh, and I started doing commercials and industrial films for companies. And I did a few plays up there too. But then, for some reason, I was doing a lot of stuff. I was doing plays. I was trying to be in a band. I had a band I was practicing with.
And what'd you play?
I played bass a little bit, but mostly I sang, but I can't really sing. So I just had a lot of, ego that I wanted to, bravado. I don't know what it was, but But I wasn't really good. And that's part of what I think kind of led me back to painting, because I was doing all these things. I was trying to write. I was doing plays.
You mean like writing plays or
writing poems, writing short stories.
Okay.
I was reading a lot. I was in a band. I was doing the stuff with the agent. I just thought, one thing that has kind of always propelled me forward, I think, is there's something about my personality that at certain points I can be realistic about myself, and I can say, look around and say, I'm doing a lot of these things, and I'm not really that great at any of them. I'm okay. I'm doing all right. They're kind of fun, but I'm not like great in any of these things. And they're not really like capturing my passion or my imagination, really. So I decided I was starting to go to the library, and I would just go to the art section and pull out art books. And if I liked the painting on the cover, I would take it home and read it. And then they would mention other artists and other movements and all that. So I would go back to the library and find books on those. And I started painting again. And I thought, when I go to a museum and I see a great painting by an artist that I really love, that gives me a feeling that I don't get when I am hearing or making music, or when I'm acting or doing any of these other things.
And what can you quantify it? Can you not quantify? Can you elaborate on that? I mean, I'm curious, as someone who really doesn't have any other creative impulses at all.
I think a lot of those other creative impulses were just like I was saying. I was joking a little bit, but just ego. I mean, I loved being on a stage in front of an audience. I loved plays. I didn't really like the commercials or the industrial films that much, although I would go for a day and have like one line in an industrial film, and so do like 15 minutes of actual work, but be there all day waiting, and I would get paid more than I would for my job at the photo lab, for 3 or 4 days.
Right.
So I did love that, but as far as like everything else, I think I was kind of ego driven, and I liked being on stage in front of people. I liked people clapping for you. I liked that kind of, and the same with the bands, and the same with maybe not writing is not like that, but so with art, with painting, it was more. I think it was more an internal kind of thing, and I also felt like I also just loved I love paint. I loved paint. I love working with paint. That's why I've never really branched out much, I think, from incorporating a lot of other disciplines into my practice. I just love working with paint. And I remember somebody asking me once, when I was in school in the 90s, art school, like, why are you a painter? Because, the whole old painting is dead thing, and it's not addressing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, some people just gravitate towards paint the same way some people gravitate towards music, or they gravitate. I don't know why, but that's what it is.
Well, I mean, people can't see this on the recording, but you did the thing where you put your hands together and you began to sort of think about this tactile experience, and so often when I'm teaching senior level classes and we have to do that horrible thing where we have to write about why we do this thing, and they all begin by making this motion where they rub their fingers together, and it really is a kind of tactile pleasure.
Yeah.
But also it's a kind of it's a challenge, and I think it's a self-determined challenge, And for me, one of the things I'm curious about is how, like, earlier you said, that you were doing these things and you would sort of realize that you were not particularly exceptional, that you really enjoyed this. And then you talked a little bit about going to the library. One thing for me that maybe I've come to peace with is that I'm not particularly exceptional, but one of the things that I really love is the fact that I think I'm getting better every day. And so there's this idea, or at least that's the challenge, is to like try and get better every day.
Right.
And I love not being bored. And I love the knowing that every day is different and that every day is a little tiny bit harder than the day before. And so in terms of thinking about that for you and the shift to painting, what was it that made you think that painting would be somehow more fulfilling?
Well, I don't know. I know I did. The reason I was going to the library and looking at the art is because I've always loved art history, and I love just the whole subject of art, and I love learning about artists and seeing what their studio looked like, and seeing photos of them, and romanticizing that whole thing. And I romanticize painting a lot, I think. I've never been able to get into that, I don't know what you call it, postmodern, where like a painter is just like a plumber showing up at work every day. And I see it as something special. And maybe it's because I'm egotistical and I have to see myself as something special to get through the day. But that's the way it is for me. I romanticize it. And
now, what kind of things were you looking at when you went to the library? Like, I love this idea of you going to the library. P.S. It was the library in North Carolina?
It was in North Carolina,
Okay.
yeah. First in North Carolina, and then when I lived in Texas, I would go to the library in Texas all the time. And
So, like, what kind of things do you remember seeing there that sort of lit you up?
the German Expressionists, definitely. I remember the first things that I really loved were the German Expressionists, the Blaureiter, and the Brücke groups. Chagall. Love Chagall.
What was it about Chagall?
I think the dreamlike quality, the color, the dreamlike quality, the romance of it, probably.
For me, there was always a kind of optimism in his work that I didn't see in other people, and then also kind of like almost like a person in love. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
they're kind of dopey.
Well,
you know?
that's part of it too. Is that he would take these people and places from his life, and they were romanticized. He would romanticize those places, those relationships, those towns, and those experiences. And I wanted to do that with my own life. Picasso.
I mean, Picasso was, another one of those people that so many people will say Picasso, and then everybody will have a different view
Right.
or a different perspective on his particular work. What was it that moved you about him?
I liked it because it was so guttural and so raw. Like one of the first things that I remember I really loved about his work, the first periods that I loved of his work was outside. I think the first thing I saw probably was Blue Period and Cubism. But then the first thing that I really, really loved was those still lifes and things that he did in his studio during World War II when he was in Paris, when the Nazis were occupying Paris. And you would have these skulls and these really just brutal-looking, brooding, kind of gloomy still lifes. And you could feel the oppression that the people must have felt then, during that occupation. And
No, I love this thing that you said about how you were always sort of interested in the art history of it, and then where you were talking about Picasso, and then in terms of his place in history and place in geography, and then also in the timeline. And was that something that you were aware of when you were looking at it? Were you also, like you said, you were reading this? Were you like reading the essays and the other stuff?
yeah, because I was kind of trying to give myself an education in art history too. I wanted to know about. That's a lot of the young people, students and things. They don't seem to have like an interest really in art history or art as a whole. Like for me, it was always more than just something I was good at and I could do. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I have these little, blinders on.
Right.
I loved art. I loved everything. I loved artists. I loved art. I loved art history. Like I said, I always wanted to see the studios. I wanted to see what what their rooms look like, what they looked like, all of those things. And so, yeah, it was just, I wanted to know how everything fit in. And back then, of course, like everybody else that I knew, I was, was all firmly rooted in that Western white male tradition. That was all I really knew. I was aware of people like Paula Modersohn-Becker, from looking at the German books and things like that. Had seen her work in reproduction in books, and I just gave some friends a book about her recently, and I wished I could have seen that show that was at the Noy Gallery in New York, and the one you're talking about.
Well, it's still there.
Is it up there still?
Yeah, in Chicago.
Oh, in Chicago. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to try to get there to see that.
It was totally worth it. And for me, the thing that was so great about that show was that, I mean, when you were talking about all these things, so far today, in my brain, I'm thinking like, oh, well, that for me just fell in my lap, or this fell in my lap. And so the same thing with that Paula Modersohn-Becker show. It was just like, I'm in Chicago and, oh, look, there's a little show. And so I'm going to walk over there and see it. Like, I definitely did not pilgrimage or road trip to see that show.
Yeah.
But good Lord, it was a great show.
About, I guess, in 2016 or so, I read this book called You Must Change Your Life, and it was about Rilke and his years as Rodin's secretary. And Rilke was married to Paula Modersohn-Becker's best friend. And so they mentioned her in that book. And so, I don't know, there was something about the way they mentioned her that I just was really attracted to her on the page. And so I started looking up books about her, and I read like 3 biographies of her, and I've got the collected letters and stuff that I haven't read yet. But she was just somebody that not only did I love her work, do I think her work is just amazing and odd and, just incredible paintings. But also, I love her as an artist. I love her ambition. I love her attitude about it, all of that. There's so many artists that I love that I do love their work, but also I love the idea of them as artists and how they lived their lives. And she's one of those. Francis Bacon's one of those, people like that.
And then just since you mentioned it, what was it about Bacon?
I just... Well, I've always admired those British painters that, got in their studios and stayed there for like 50 years and, stayed in the same place and didn't do shit else but paint and, all of that. And Bacon, I like him because he's opinionated. I like him because he's a drunk. I like him because he just seems to have this no-nonsense attitude. Like when you hear like Joan Mitchell, like somebody will try, you'll see an interview or something with her, and somebody will try to say, oh, this must be about this or this must be about that or whatever, and she's like, no, it's just blah blah blah, like reducing it. And that's not true. There's more to the work, there's more to Bacon, there's more to her, but they kind of try to downplay that, any kind of like grandiose reading of their work. And I always think that's both funny and, I don't know, in a way kind of admirable. And I just like that no-nonsense kind of approach. And I've loved Bacon since that. There's a video of him, documentary, where he's the writer's traveling around London with him, and they go to lunch, and Francis Bacon, all of a sudden they're talking, and all of a sudden he just like lurches up and like bumps into the table and reaches across and gets the carafe of wine and is like pouring the wine for them and spilling it all over the table. And I think I romanticize those days when artists weren't careerists, where we didn't always have to watch what we say, because if we offend somebody, they might not give us a show somewhere down the line. And where these artists just spoke their minds. They were just true to themselves, And that's what we all that kind of freedom, that is a kind of an example of the kind of freedom that an artist in our minds has when we're young. And then we get involved in this, like, whatever kind of segment of the art world and all that where we get involved with, and I realize, I won't speak for anybody else, but it seems like this, if I can't sleep late and stay out late drinking and arguing about art with people, and I mean, then why didn't I just go to, like, I'd be much better off if I just went to and learned business, and at least I would have insurance and all of that. So that's the freedom in being an artist, is that and then if you, like, curtail that because you want a certain career, or you want, I don't know, I struggle with that all the time.
Now, for me, I mean, just to backtrack a little bit in terms of thinking about Bacon, I mean, for me, that's really funny. I think there should be another podcast where artists just talk about that BBC documentary that I got at the Memphis Public Library on VHS, and I would go and rent it or check it out every once in a while. Yeah. But that's the one where he just, over the course of the hour, he just gets blasted, and then they end up at what he describes as an old Queen bar,
right?
And then they're all hanging out singing. But then that's also the documentary where he says, where the interviewer says, "Now, Francis, tell me about the mouth," and then Francis goes, "Oh, well, the mouth is so beautiful, and it just has all of the colors of a Monet's sunset." Mm-hmm. And then the interviewer goes, "But Francis, all of your mouths are black," and he says, "I never got it right." And it was just this, like, quick thing. And you could also tell where he was really, I mean, for me, the thing that was really interesting about that documentary was that Bacon, you could kind of feel like he was both comfortable and uncomfortable in the limelight. Like, really, the place that he wanted to be the most was in the studio. And then after the studio was done, drinking and being in the old Queen bar.
Right.
But and then for him to be in the limelight, you could see where he was sort of like, I don't know if putting on airs is the right term, but you could tell where he was trying to be the artist, You
can also tell that Bacon, he had a lot of canned responses to things.
Right.
I think he'd been interviewed so much over the years, and he knew what was sensationalistic. He knew he could turn a phrase, and he had some of these things down. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, there's one, I don't know if it's that one, but I think there's one where he even pulls something out, a note out of his jacket, and he says, "I hope you don't mind, I wrote something down earlier." And he gives an answer to the question.
Because he knew it was coming.
Either he knew it was coming, or it was something he wanted to talk about. And, I don't know if he knew it was coming, or if he just said, if this comes up, I want to work this in some way. I don't know what the context of that was, but I thought it was interesting that he had thought about it beforehand.
Well, for me, the great crime against the world and against Bacon is that those paintings they have to be under glass. Right. And so in order to photograph them, like, all of the books that we have are based on slides from the last time they were photographed.
Right.
And the color is horrible. And so, like, because I remember going to see, there was the show at the Met. Yes. And I remember walking in, and I remember saying, "Oh, I'm at the Met." And then again, it fell on my lap. "Oh, here's a Francis Bacon show. I just happened to be in New York, and I'm going to see it." And I remember walking in, and in the very first room, I just said, "Fuck," like, over and over again. Yeah. Because the colors were insane.
I had that same reaction, because I had no idea what a colorist he was. Mm-hmm. No idea.
And that was such a massive show. Like, I remember I was also there sort of late in the day, and I remember saying to myself, "Oh my God, I only have an hour in here." And then I remember saying, I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to come back the first thing in the morning before I go and do those other things that you have to do when you're in New York. But I remember that show. It was so massive. And the way that they had it laid out is there were huge chunks from each period. And so they were able to divide it pretty seamlessly. Mm-hmm. But then also they had a lot of, there was this one wall that was just a huge photograph of his studio. And then there were a lot of, like, little studio artifacts in there. Yeah. But I remember that show being so powerful. I mean, in the way that, like, I tell anyone, if there's a retrospective, I don't care who it is, you need to go see it, because you're able to see all of the growth and
you're
the
surprised
movement.
because you're always going to see some aspect of them that you had no idea existed.
Yeah.
And like the color or whatever.
Yeah, and that color was just unbelievable. And then, of course, also the size. Like we have these books, or we have a slide projector or whatever, and it creates this particular size that we're used to. But then once you start to walk through and you see the size of some of these, but then also I was really aware of the blankness, how there were just huge, massive passages of the same blue, or massive passages of the same orange, and then these really compressed, intense areas. And then, if I remember right, that show also really played up the Edward Muybridge photography and the importance of the Muybridge photos for him. And you saw the same show, so what do you remember about it?
The color was that's the one takeaway that I was just floored by, because you're right. You see all the books and the images in the books, and they're all these browns and grays and blacks, and they have some blues, but they all look really muted and toned, grayed down, but you see him in person, and he's got these pinks or an orange and it was just mind blowing for me, and it was one of those events that, I always appreciated his work and liked his work before that, but it was one of those events that just totally changed the way you think about an artist. And this is an artist that we've all seen over and over and over again. So it was shocking to me, to see that.
Yeah, of course, Bacon would be delighted to hear us say that it was shocking.
Right.
Now, thinking about that, though, just to backtrack a little bit, to go back to the library, and so you were looking at these guys, and then when was it that you made the decision to start painting yourself?
Probably shortly after that. It was around 1992. Actually, I had bought a canvas when I was still living with that woman who was the stage manager at the theaters. We were living together, and I had bought a canvas, and I'd started it. I had no idea what I wanted to paint. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was a figure, and I'd started it, and then I'd kind of like left it in the corner. And I remember she was complaining to me one day, like, you bought this canvas, you bought these paints, you started the painting, now you're just leaving it there. Are you going to finish this or not? It's just taking up space in the living room, all this, And so then I was just like, motherfucker, I'm not going to touch that thing. It's going to sit there. If she hadn't said that, I would have probably gotten rid of it and thrown it away. But I kept it, but I didn't ever work on it. And then eventually, not surprisingly, a very short while later, she and I broke up. And I met my wife, Robin, and I moved in with her. We moved in together. And
this was in North Carolina?
In North Carolina, okay. In Chapel Hill. And so I brought that painting with me, and I just started painting when Robin and I got together, and I just started working on it again. And I kept, and it was all either German expressionist or Chagall-ish kind of influenced, rip-off stuff.
And it was figurative.
Figurative. And I just started painting. And I would go to Michael's and buy a canvas, and I forgot the really cheap paint, the really cheap acrylic paint. It's like basics. Mm-hmm. They're the basics paint, And I would buy those and the pre-stretched canvases, and just paint. And they were all awful. Thank God. I think one person that I know still owns one of them, but I don't. Thank God the rest of them I think are gone by now.
No. Oh, okay, so hang on, let's back up just a little bit. So you made this decision to start painting. Like, mm-hmm. you had the impulse after seeing these paintings and sort of like returning to a thing. I'm curious, when you moved out and moved in with Robin, or were more around Robin, what do you think the What was the itch that painting was scratching?
Well, I don't know, but for one thing, Robin was really interested in art as well. She had just gotten back from backpacking by herself for like 3 months around Europe. And she'd seen a lot of the German expressionists in person, and I had never had. So that was one of the first things we connected on. We started talking about her traveling, and we started talking about those paintings and things. She was also a writer. So I don't know. It just felt natural to fall into that lifestyle, to fall into that. And once I found someone who they thought art was just important in life as I thought it should be, it seemed very easy for us to make that the center of our lives, and to talk about it, to read about it, to make it, all of that.
Now, you were in North Carolina. Now, what was, and you talked about the library. What about the city itself? Was it a art-centric city? Was there a place where you could see art?
Well, Chapel Hill, they have the school there, so there's a lot kind of going on there student-wise. There was and right next to the town of Chapel Hill is that little town Carrboro, and they had a little art center there that would show contemporary art.
Okay.
I remember going there to see shows, and I remember going to the museums. I think there's maybe a museum in Winston-Salem and Raleigh, and so I remember going to those occasionally. And then also her family, Robin was from D.C., so for holidays and things, we would go to see her family in D.C., and we would go to the National Gallery. That's where I went to the National Gallery for the first time, the Smithsonian, all of those kind of things in D.C., and that's where I saw the first de Koonings in person, and that just, Wilfredo Lam, all of those people that I really admired and loved and had only seen in books. That's where I first saw that work in person, started seeing real art in person. And then that inspired me to paint more too.
Okay.
It seemed like the more art I saw, the more I was affected by it, the more I wanted to be in a studio and take this seriously. And
now, so you mentioned going to DC and seeing the de Kooning, and then what about, was there anything in North Carolina that clicked with you where you were like, oh shit, look, there's that piece or whatever?
No, I mean, in North Carolina, mostly what I remember back then, because it was the early 90s, was just a bunch of Grateful Dead shit and, hippies and, things like that.
No, what was it about the so just skip over the hippies. What was it that, when you saw the de Kooning, obviously there is for you, there's a precedent in the same way, with Bacon, you've seen it in books, you've heard about it, etc. Talk to me a little bit about the experience of seeing those in real life.
It just seemed really powerful to me. It seemed like one of them was one of the women. So they were these kind of figurative still, but he was, about half and half figurative and abstraction. They just seemed so forceful and strong, and they seemed to kind of, to me at that time, the first time I'd ever seen anything like that in person, it seemed to punch you. I mean, it just seemed. It seems structured, but wild at the same time. And that was something I think that I never really, I always separated those two things, the wild, expressive craziness or this structure, more thoughtful thing. And to see those jam together, I think for the first time, because I guess, of course he was influenced by, Cubism still and those kinds of Picasso-ish oid kind of stuff. And yeah, the first time I saw that, it was just something that was seemed totally different to me than anything I'd seen it in books before, but it just didn't have the same impact on me.
I mean, for me, when I think about de Kooning, I love that thing that you said about structure and wildness. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say the thing about the structure and the wildness. For me, the structure comes from the repetition. Like, it comes from the, I'm going to wrestle with this forever,
Yep.
and like looking at that painting and then saying, yeah, you really wrestled with that for a long time. Like you can't see all the layers, but you can see the sense that it is a place for long-term engagement, whereas like, I think if, somebody had been there to say, hey, Bill, we have 1,000 canvases, so if you wanted to, you could totally just, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like to say, okay. And then also there's a part of me that sometimes puts de Kooning in that an elephant can make a really great painting if you take it away from them at the right time, And I'm convinced that somebody was there. It was probably just him that said, okay, stop, and there was a keen understanding of when to stop. But now thinking about that, who was the other artist that you mentioned that you saw?
Wilfredo Lam.
Okay. I don't know them.
Kind of a surrealist Latin American painter.
Okay.
It's I guess if you're comparing him to somebody Western, it would be sort of Miro-ish, but more like these kind of strange, figurative kind of compositions. So really surrealist kind of influenced stuff. Let's see, trying to think of who else. That's where I saw the first, like Rothko's and any of those Abex people. I saw the first work I saw in person of theirs was in D.C. And I remember I saw one of the first artworks that really affected me, though, stronger probably than any of those, was a photograph. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Excuse me. Because Jody Brewer had seen a Robert Frank show somewhere and maybe in New York that she'd just gone to recently. And so we were talking about Robert Frank, and one of the first images I saw in D.C. was a show of his, and it was one of his later kind of photos where he was collaging pieces and drawing on them a little and writing on them a little bit too. And it was very simple. It was just this picture, kind of a blurred out, kind of not really in focus, had a kind of a picture of this little girl and then a kind of a house in the background. And he had written on there, "This is a picture of my daughter." I think it's Andrea. "This is a picture of my daughter, Andrea. She died in a plane crash at whatever age, 21 or something like that. I think about her every day." And to me, that almost made me cry just looking at that. And that was like, I don't know why it affected me so. Just the simplicity and the but the deep emotion, but that expressed so simply, and it conveyed everything it needed to convey to almost knock you over.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems like it has all the things that you're interested in. I mean, in terms of it has the sense of history, it has the personal connection. It also has a kind of relic, frozen time moment.
Right.
And then also I can't remember if I've already said that, but the connection with the daughter.
Right.
I mean, there's a real sort of close familial, important thing that we can all kind of relate to in one way or another.
Right.
And so was photography something that you looked at often, or was it?
I looked at because I was interested in that in high school. I was still kind of interested in it. I looked at my favorites were Robert Frank, Harry Callahan. What's the guy that? Of course, Stieglitz and those people, Edward Weston, Tina Modotti. I was looking at all those people. I really liked Harry Callahan because he was just like this, really a purist. It was all black and white, available light. just really like hardcore that way. And some of his things, he'll have these like, it'll be like these kind of reeds, these thin reeds in the snow, and they really just cross that line to abstraction because it's so simple. The snow is all like bleached out, and the reeds are just there, almost like these cuts these dark cuts in the photo, and it really approaches abstraction. So I was really interested in a lot of the. That's kind of what made Robin and I think we wanted to move to New Mexico for the first time. Was we were reading these books and these letters of Stieglitz and George O'Keeffe, and that really captured our imagination. And so we thought, we want to go to New Mexico, and we tried to get there, but I was thinking about this the other day. We were traveling from North Carolina. We just decided, we quit our jobs and we decided we were going to go to Taos, and we didn't know anybody in Taos or have any job prospects there or anything. We just had our last paychecks, and we had a Chevy Sprint, and we each had a Foot Locker with our stuff in it, and we were like, okay, here we go. And I don't know what we thought we were going to do, or I guess we thought we were just going to get a hotel room and stay there till we found jobs and get a place to live or whatever. I don't know. But
to me, that is so amazing because, like, there's a part of my brain that just said, like, wait, where are your books? I mean, for me, like, the whole reason for me to live the turtle life, is this enormous tractor trailer load of books that I have.
Oh, yeah.
But thinking about that, that's such an impulsive, to me, not just impulsive, I wouldn't say reckless, because I think, so much of what you said so far is this sort of romantic idea of it. To me, it almost sounds like you were aware of the storiness of it in the moment. It's like, yes, let's do this, and it's going to be the beginning of a chapter. That kind of thing.
I think so. I think that was, unfortunately, we never made it there. The Robin never changed the oil in that car that she had, and so in West Memphis, the engine locked up. And so we ended up going to Eureka Springs for a while and staying with my family and then my grandmother. And then Robin's sister had just moved to Dallas with her husband, and she really was desperate to have family there because she had moved from D.C. So she asked Robin and I to come move to Dallas. And so that's as far west as we got then. So it took us years later until just a few years ago when we finally moved to Taos and got there.
Now, it's funny. There was Brittany Bullock gave this great talk at U of M, and every once in a while she would say, timestamp, 2008. And she would it was almost like there was a little picture. So what year is this? Where you guys ended up in Dallas?
That had to be 93.
Okay.
Because we got married when we were living in Dallas. We got married in 94.
Okay.
But I think it was 93 by the time we moved there.
Now, what did you do in Dallas?
I painted, and I got a job at a photo lab immediately. And I started showing in Dallas, actually. I did what you're not supposed to do and just sent images to galleries and said, are you looking for new artists? And there was this area called Deep Ellum, which was downtown, and it was like a gallery kind of arts district. And this one gallery responded to me and said, yeah, we're putting together a group show. Do you want to put a couple of these in a group show? And so I did, and then that led to meeting other people. So I was showing at a few galleries then. I did have a few art shows in Dallas in the early 90s. And then I had one of those other moments that I was talking about where I was looking at the other art and I thought, this art is much better than my art. And I thought I could make up the ground myself, but I knew if I went back to school, it would accelerate my development a lot. And so that's when I applied to the College of Art, Memphis College of Art here. And when I got accepted in I think it was 94, or for the 95 semester, January semester, we moved back. We moved to Memphis. And it was Robin's first time to live here, but we moved to Memphis so I could go to school here.
Now, that would be a perfect place to pause, but I'm going to back up a little bit and ask a couple of follow-up questions on Dallas. Now, how long were you there? About a year?
No, we were there, a couple of years.
Okay.
I'd say about 2.5 years.
Okay. Now, I mean, in terms of thinking about art, I mean, Dallas has got and Fort Worth.
Oh, yeah.
It's all tore up. And so, like, were there things in particular that were kind of important for you there?
Well, the Dallas Museum of Art was the first museum I saw when I went to when I got there. And I do remember seeing a great Bill Viola show there that I really liked and really responded to.
Now, truth be told, I only know like a handful of Bill Viola pieces. What was it about him that clicked for you?
I think, I don't know, I think for me the spirituality of it. It was one of those, I'm sure you've seen it, where the figure's standing there and on one side of the projection there's a spark at the feet, and pretty soon the whole thing is engulfed in the whole figure, the person, everything is engulfed in flames. On the other side it's water. It's like a drop of water that starts coming down, and then pretty soon this whole floodgate opens,
Right.
and the whole figure is just obliterated by the water. I loved the theatricality of it, and I loved the spirituality. And then, of course, Fort Worth, the museum in Fort Worth is incredible, especially the modern they have there now. I don't think that was there back then when I was, or at least if it was, I wasn't paying attention to it. I remember going to the Kimball. I remember the Barnes collection traveled to the Kimball back then when they'd won that court case that allowed it to travel for a little bit. So I was able to see a lot of the modernist work.
Now, thinking about the Kimball, I mean, that's another space that's very particular and kind of peculiar. And they have a really fascinating collection. I remember they have a really crazy Bonnard that's just a massive sort of long one where there's all this crazy deep space and you have to navigate and jump over a bunch of things to get to the things that you want to look at. Are there things that you remember from either of those collections? Or the city itself? I mean, to me, the art scene there, I've never been a part of it.
I never really, as far as the city, like say Dallas, I never lived in Fort Worth, but as far as Dallas goes, I never really loved Dallas. I liked living close to my sister-in-law, and then when she had our niece, I really loved being close to them. I liked the people that I met in the art scene there. The art scene was okay, and then I got involved in a lot of like projects. Like I remember I was working on some mural project. It's in an underpass downtown in Dallas, and they gave us like 8 feet by I don't know how many. I can't remember how many feet, and we had to present a design, and they picked artists to do that. And got involved in that, and I did my piece in that. So I was trying to get involved and trying to start some sort of serious involvement in an art scene. That was probably the first time I really tried that, and had any small success with it. But as far as the city goes, it was just like really concrete, and it didn't seem like when we moved to Memphis, I was moving back to Memphis, and Robin was coming here for the first time. It was just so great because it was so gritty and dirty, and the little hole in the wall bars and all of this stuff was just so to me so much better than a cookie cutter clean Dallas. So
now thinking about, I mean, there's a couple of things I want to touch on. One is the kind of work you were making at the time, and then the other one that I want to touch on before we leave today is the spirituality part, because it feels like that's been a big part of it for a long time.
Yeah.
But how would you, and then also for me, like going to college was the time where I learned everything, and so I'm super curious about how you were making stuff before you went to college in a mature way, or in a way that was sort of more fully formed than my experience as a maker. And so, like, what kind of things were you making? What kind of things were motivating you when you were working there in Dallas?
Well, they were figurative. I was doing figurative work. I was doing my version of what I thought, I guess, expressionism was. Like, if I look back on them, if I look back on what I remember about the work, I would kind of describe it more as neo-expressionism. I didn't really know about that at the time, except for like Basquiat or somebody. But more along those lines, I would say like a cross between like Chagall and neo-expressionism or something. So that was kind of what I was making when I was what I applied to school with.
Okay. You said they were figurative. What's going on in the paintings? I mean, is it more like portraiture, or is there a thing that's happening?
Well, I would some from subconscious stuff, like from dreams, imagery from dreams. I remember reading a book. There was a Gabriel Garcia Marquez book of short stories I read that had this title. I think the title of one of the stories was The Three Sleepwalkers, and I did a painting based on that.
I mean, I laugh in part because this idea of people with different experiences. For me, I think I had read The Hobbit and part of The Lord of the Rings when I went to college. There was no, I don't know why that wasn't there. Just out of curiosity, just to back up a little bit, way back maybe, what was it you think? Because as you're talking, I am realizing that such a huge part of your story is the reading, the history, the fullness of this experience. Where do you think reading came in? And because, I mean, it feels so integral.
Well, like when I was trying to write, and I wanted to be a writer, I guess I kind of approached that in the same way that I approached wanting to be an artist, a visual artist. I should start reading stuff. I should start, if I want to be a writer, I should start reading some good stuff. So, and I was into all the, like, Joseph Conrad, Nikolai Gogol, a lot of Russian, Nikolai Gogol, Solzhenitsyn. I was reading that kind of stuff, Arthur Koestler, Darkness at Noon and all that. I was just always, I loved Henry Miller. I read almost everything Henry Miller ever wrote. That's another thing and that falls in line with art and writing I love, which is confessional and kind of like personal, confessional. Henry Miller doesn't, like, there's a lot of people have a lot of problems with Henry Miller, obviously, but he never really paints himself as like this paragon of virtue. He's not saying anything that he either did or didn't do in the novels is his fiction is right or correct, or and a lot of it is made up. It's all a pistache of experience and fantasy and all this stuff. So that really appealed to me. And so then when I was still reading, I loved that magic realism and kind of ish Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I used a lot of that as inspiration for what I was painting at the time, what I was interested in.
Now, what about this? I mean, you touched on spiritualism a couple of times. What form did that take, and then how do you feel like that? Where's the seed of that?
Well, I think it starts with that combination that I was talking about religion and the supernatural. So I've always kind of had that vein running through my whole life, really. I think that it's something that, I don't know, I just always have felt that kind of that kind of myth, that kind of I mean, it's so important as far as metaphor. Um, I'm not sure why. I mean, other than it's just kind of ingrained. I mean, it's just kind of, it's that kind of spirituality. I mean, I go back and forth, and it depends on the day, whether I would say say, spiritual I am personally. I'm interested in all of it. I'm interested in a lot of it. I'm interested in the Jungian stuff. Recently, in the last few years, I've taken a lot of like seminars and classes and things like that in Jungian ideas and alchemy and all of those kinds of things. Joseph Campbell and all of that I never, and I'm coming to that very late because most people I know that were into that stuff, they went through it a long time ago. I just started on all of that a few years ago. So it's still kind of new to me, and I don't know, I wouldn't say I knew a lot about it, but I'm interested in it. And like when in Chapel Hill, when I first started painting and I started making like my attempts at what I thought were serious paintings, I would pick a lot of like say I would pick a subject like angels, and paint paintings of angels, or paint paintings of. I remember I had this book I loved. I still have it somewhere. That were just a whole book from old masters of the faces of Christ. And I would do drawings from all of those, and ink drawings and stuff, over and over and over. I think it started with kind of like that, and then kind of has come around to a more like a Joseph Campbell-ish kind of view of myth and the way it operates in our lives, and how we still need that kind of thing. We've kind of separated it out, and rather than look at like a religion as fact, look at it as a metaphor for the human experience, kind of. And that seems to me more important to me now in my work than any kind of real, reading of it as this is a fact and this is real,
right.
And all
Yeah.
that.
And I mean, it seems like for me, like thinking back on this time that we've been talking, I mean, I think one of the things that I really like about it is that there is this kind of fullness and this real sense of like it feels like if you were a tree, you would be like a fir, where it's kind of reaching in a lot of areas,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of fractals out, and there's a lots of places that you've explored and sort of thought about and sort of been a part of, and that feeds your practice. Do you think? Do you feel like you need? Well, I mean, I guess that's you do. I mean, like part of me is thinking about how painting is a part of our lives, and then part of me is also thinking a little bit about your sense of or like a thirst for knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and a thirst for story and narrative, and then sort of putting all of that stuff together into a life. I mean, in the way that I talk about, with students, talking about what are the things that we need for a full life. I mean, to me, it feels like to Hamlet, I didn't understand that until I was old,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like for you that presence was kind of always there. Do you feel that way?
I think so, at least in some form. I don't know if it was as well understood as I think I understand it now, but I think it was always there. Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
think that was modeled in a way? Like, I mean, you were talking about your grandmother and the different ways she was sort of looking at that, the images of Christ, and then also sort of the supernatural. Do you feel like that was modeled for you sort of at an early age from the other people around you?
I think that definitely is a big influence. I mean, I don't know that it would be there in my strain and my personality if it wasn't in hers. Um, so I think that definitely has to have give some weight to that. I don't, and I think that once those things, once in your formative, they say your personality is formed by age of 5 or something, that once that stuff is in there, I don't know that it ever leaves. Like I can reject ideas of religion or spirituality as false or not true or not believable, and I can be kind of an atheist or an agnostic, but then also there's still that connection to that imagery. There's still the connection to those stories. There's still I'm not sure how all of that plays out, and I'm not sure how it all I'm not sure how that all plays out, how it will all move my work forward or move me forward personally. I don't know. But.
I think, part of this is also like, you and I are sitting down and we're telling this story and we're figuring all these things out and we're making these connections. I don't think we necessarily have to have like and that's the moral of the story. Right. Like for me, the thing that I'm really struck by is that stuff that I was talking about earlier about the fullness of it. And I can't remember who it was. It was in a book or maybe a podcast that I was listening to later or earlier. There was something about how they described a person as having a curious and restless heart. Mm-hmm. And to me, it feels like that kind of curiousness is something that has been woven throughout our conversation. And then also the different ways that you've explored the possibility for expression, in music and in theater and in art and in writing and like all of these different ways, to me feels really interesting. And I think one of the things that I don't think we necessarily have to have the answer for, one of the things that I really love about that is thinking about the different ways that those ways of expressing sort of work together. Mm-hmm. And I think like there's a natural part of us that wants to say like, well, which one is the right one? Like, are you a painter who's a writer or like that stupid question. Yeah. But I think the thing that I'm satisfied with and that I really like is the presence of all of those things in there. And I love this thing that you came back to again and again, this idea of reading. And selfishly, like I look back on my life and think, well, I really should have started doing that earlier. That was really not something that I became really interested in until I was probably in my 40s. But I love and am envious of the fact that it was such a powerful part of your early life.
Well, part of it maybe I think might be just that I just thought maybe this is what artists do, or this is what, I was looking at, I always think if you don't know what to do, look at people you admire, look at people you want to be like in some, that you want your life to have some kind of same aspect of what theirs is, or your work or whatever, and see what they did, as a starting point. And, like the more I would read about artists, the more I would, the books would mention, things they read, things they were interested in, how they kind of used that material in their work, as a source, Augustine with poetry and all of that, so, and then I'd always loved reading, and I always, it was something that, my parents always read to us and always thought it was important and fun to do. And so it just seemed like and then back then, you never had a phone to look at or anything like that. So if you were bored or whatever, you just picked up a book. And
Now, just out of curiosity, because you mentioned it, like going back to someone, and sort of like almost like a touchstone, do you feel like, it feels like you would have a great many touchstones from a lot of different places. Who do you think of as like your touchstone list?
As far as artists or whatever?
Yeah, anybody. I know it's kind of like a pop quiz. It's like that podcast, A Brush With, but they give them the questions before, like, what's the piece of art you would want to live with
Right.
forever? Like that kind of thing. That was a total pop quiz thing. I didn't mean to drop a pop quiz on you.
No,
Are there people that pop to mind, though?
Well, I mean, in my personal life, there are people. There are, like, say, Fred Burton at MCA. He was kind of like my mentor and my main painting professor there. And he was the first person that I met in real life who structured their life around making art. That was the most important thing. He went to residencies, he taught school, and he painted. That was pretty much all he did. And everything was structured so that the studio would keep going. And so he was definitely one that was really important to me especially at that time. The guy, there used to be a guy in town here named Paul Edwards who was a painter. He had gone to Yale at the same time. He was in the same class with John Curran and Lisa Yuskavage and Sean Landers and those kind of people. And he lived in a garage. He was practically homeless here in town. He lived in the back of Barksdale's garage over there that used to do the work on the MGs and all those British sports cars and all that. He lived in one of the bays in the back of there for a long time. He lived at Plan B. That's where I first met him, when I had a studio at Plan B Studios. He made these big paintings of bullfights and lion tamers and all of these grand, heroic kind of expressionistic, figurative paintings, really detailed. And he was the first person who I would go over to his studio, because I had a studio at Plan B. It was super cheap. It's like $25 or something a month, and it was it was horrible over there. There was everything leaked, and it was freezing and all that. But I would go over and sit in his studio at night and watch him and talk to him about art and painting and watch him work. And he was the first person I ever saw from start to finish make a painting, like from putting the drawing down to. Because when you look at so much work and people that you admire and you see their work, and you always think as a student, because I was in school at the time as a student, how do they get from there to this finished piece? It's a mystery. And so it was really helpful to me to see him work on a huge painting every step of the way. Also, interestingly enough, when my mom was trying to encourage me when I was getting out of high school, and she was trying to encourage me to be an artist, she would cut out clips from the Commercial Appeal about artists and things, people who were living and working as artists, to kind of inspire me, And one of them was an article about him that she had given me, and that I still had when I met him. I still had it in a folder somewhere, so he would definitely be one. And as far as touchstones about like just like artists or things, I think there's so many influences and so many artists and mostly painters that I admire, but it's hard to say one. One of the ones I would say is John Hoyland, the British painter.
Okay.
He was he was really hot in like the swinging '60s London. He was a guy who had come to America and met Howard Hodgkin and or not Howard Hodgkins. The push and pull guy, Hans Hofmann. Hans Hofmann, and he met the Motherwell and all these people, and then he went back and he was doing these kind of abstracted stain paintings, and then later on he his work changed, but he was always an abstract painter, and he was just one of those kind of no nonsense kind of guys too. There's a great movie of him called 6 Days in September. I think you can see it on. It's really short. I think you can see it on YouTube. and it's about him. They follow him through the making of one painting, so I just
And
liked
that
his
was
attitude,
the
his
first
career,
of
and all
two
that.
interviews
I love
that I
British work,
recorded
so
with Paul
it's great.
Behnke.
Okay.
The interview
Good
that
time
you
to
just
pause.
listened to was recorded on November 30th, 2024. Please join us next week when we have the second of two interviews that I did with Paul. Until then, thank you so much for listening.